Welcome to the ParentNet podcast by Focus on the Family Singapore. In each episode, we'll be speaking with everyday parents and practitioners as they share with us gems from their parenthood journey. Keep tuning in to learn with us as we figure it out together.
Hello and welcome to the ParentNet podcast. My name is EJ and I am your host for this episode. Parenting today is really different from the past, especially in the area of discipline. Now, traditional methods like spanking are now widely frowned upon. Instead, this term called positive discipline is gaining popularity and praise. So in today's episode of the ParentNet podcast, we want to explore a little bit more on the topic of positive discipline. Joining me on our ParentNet podcast is our guest, Alicia Yah, a mom and also a very dedicated early childhood educator here in Singapore. So welcome to our ParentNet podcast, Alicia.
Hello, hi EJ. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much for joining us. As we kick off this podcast, I would like to get you to tell all of us a little bit more about yourself, your family, and what's happening for you right now.
Hello everybody, I'm Alicia. I have 4 children and I've been married for 12 years. My children are aged 11, 9, 7 and 4. I enjoy being with children, which is also why I'm in the early childhood sector. I've been in the profession for about 23 years and I think since day one till today, I have never regretted being in this sector where I deal with children. I also help families as well as educators.
Wow, thank you so much, Alicia, for being on our podcast. And I'm so already very inspired by as I hear you do this introduction, sharing a mom of 4 in the early childhood sector for 23 years. It's almost like day in, day out, you are dealing with children and especially also in the area of parenting. Right?
Yes.
So it's a very nice segue as we open this conversation about positive discipline. Now, I cannot assume that everyone here knows what is positive discipline. So maybe bring us through. What is positive discipline?
Sure. So positive discipline is a philosophy and a set of practices which aims to teach children and guide children by fostering a respectful and a supportive environment. So instead of using punishment to control behavior, positive discipline focuses on encouraging good behavior through positive reinforcement, empathy, and setting clear and consistent boundaries.
Wow. So it's about encouraging positive behavior. That came out really strongly for me. And it's also fostering good values and behaviors that we want to see in the children. So as a parent and an educator yourself in the Singapore scene, do you see positive discipline gaining traction here? Or is it still seen predominantly as like a Western concept?
Actually, positive discipline is gaining traction here. It's not just a Western concept. So more parents and educators are actually recognizing its benefits and they're actually implementing it in their daily interactions with children. They want to foster a more respectful and supportive parent-child relationship. At the same time, they are also looking into the emotional well-being of the children. So gone were the days where they really do a lot of very, very strong punishment, but they take time, parents do take time to listen to their children as well.
So to effectively execute positive discipline, I hear you that it takes time. It takes a lot of dedication, patience from the parents ourselves to actually live it out. Now, I've heard many interesting conversations about positive disciplines, some right and some maybe not so healthy or right. And some parents have actually told me, say, wow, positive discipline doesn't mean that we relinquish our authority as a parent. We are so concerned about building good relationship and then we become like a friend and sometimes over-friendly to our children. So how can parents balance positive discipline with still maintaining authority on the home front in that parent-child relationship?
Yes, so like I've mentioned earlier, positive discipline has this portion called setting clear and consistent boundaries. So children still need to know where the boundaries lie because while we have mutual respect, actually children, they need to know that where their boundaries because they're still young. They do not know where the parameters are, where the boundaries are. And as parents, we need to guide and we need to teach them. But yet, a lot of times in the conventional way of doing it, parents will just use pain or hurt to get them away from danger. But actually, by explaining to the children the consequences will really help. So I think there are just a few thoughts on this. Like, you set clear and consistent boundaries. You define the rules for the children. So, and you have to use firm but yet very kind communication when you're talking to the children. You don't shout, you don't yell, you don't raise your voice, but use firm voice. And we need to let the children know, like I mentioned, the consequences. Oh, over there's danger. So, if you would run across the road like this, what will happen? So we have to explain some of these consequences to the children. And after they've calmed down or they're ready, can actually go for a more collaborative approach. Means we focus on the problem solving together. We co-create solutions together. And I think that's really important. And lastly, which I always tell parents, please be the model for the child. So you model right behavior as a parent. If you are teaching the children to be kind and compassionate, then please be a kind and compassionate parent yourself. So if you find that the child is yelling at the sibling, then it could be also because you have been modeling shouting behaviors at home, which is why the child is also doing it that way. So be the good model, be the right model, so that the child will see right examples.
Wow, this whole part about being the right model, setting good example for our children is so important. And I really love the example you brought up about of shouting at the sibling, because I feel like emotions are really real. I don't know, ever since I became a parent myself, I feel like my emotions are very easily riled up, especially with my child. And sometimes even the slightest word he says, tends to just triggers me, and I will easily lashed out, and all these things I learned about positive discipline is I'm trying to grasp it back again. So in the journey, in the world of parenthood or parenting, emotions for parents are also very real. We are dealing with so many things. You and I here, we are both working parents. We have to deal with the survival of, I have one kid, you have 4 kids at home. And many times, sometimes the smallest thing I would say would even trigger us, rock our emotions, and we get upset or angry easily. I'm sure a lot of our ParentNet podcast listeners can identify with, in the parenting journey, feeling angry at many times. Sometimes it's with the family, sometimes it's with things that happen at work or outside. Could you share with us some tips how we can better exercise positive discipline while managing anger? How can parents better manage our emotions and carry out this positive discipline calmly, constructively?
So I totally can empathize with you, EJ. Yeah, having that kind of emotions, especially after a long day of work. I think earlier we also talked about, how to balance this, maintaining the authority and giving them boundaries. Now, I think this is the point, the authority part where it becomes a power struggle with the child. It is the only thing that will actually bring up all our negative emotions. I always advise parents, number one, I think the self-care portion is very important. If you know you are tired after a long day of work, maybe having a shower before going to your child is important. Or if that inappropriate behavior happened right at that time, then probably you might, you're getting angry, the anger is coming up. It may not be wise to actually manage that behavior then. You might just want to take a deep breath, turn around, or get somebody else, whether it's your wife or your husband, to actually help with the child. Help the child with his emotions, help the child with calming down before you stepping in to manage the situation. So I think it's about self-management for the parents. And we should never discipline the children because it's a loss of our power, or we are trying to gain their respect in the fastest way possible. The respect comes through a lot of journeying with the children and being there to connect with them. Some parents realize that, I'm so angry because you don't respect me at all. And in order to gain back the respect, what do? I either shout at you because the loud voice will instill fear. And when the child is fearful, the child will say, okay, at that moment, the child will say, all right, I will comply. But does it necessarily mean respect? Does it necessarily mean you have connected with the child? I'm afraid not.
So, Alicia, just building up on what you said, at an early child's age, when we assert, maybe it's through shouting, maybe it's through certain very controlling behavior, the child would comply.
Yes.
In a sense. Are there any long-term effects or impact on the child when they grow older?
Yes, of course. So I guess when the child comply at that moment, number one, the child may not fully understand what is the inappropriate behavior, what is the consequences. The only consequence that he has faced at this moment is probably daddy or mommy shouting at me. Yeah, and that's the only thing he understood. And what he actually linked it with is, then it means that I gain back authority, I gain back respect. But that's not what we want from the child. So the child will carry on with this. So I have seen siblings, the older sibling will have certain expectations on the younger siblings. And when the younger sibling do not comply, the older one will shout, or the older one will hit the table. Exactly like probably what the parent did. So you see the impact. It goes on and on. So when he grows older, the child may not be able to have the handles to know what is the right behavior to do it when I'm upset, when I'm angry, or how do I go for a win-win situation. Yes. So long-term wise, the child may not fully understand the consequences. In fact, it's a lot more emotional for the child rather than logical. But what we hope to is we hope that the children will have that responsibility to co-create the solution. They will go for a win-win solution. They will go for being more empathetic towards others.
I think that this is so appropriate and so true. And what you rightly brought up, Alicia, is about a learned behavior for the child. So if he or she sees the parent retaliating, responding in angry words or harsh treatment, they learn it. While they may suppress it, they may comply with that at the immediate situation, yet they have learned it, that behavior. You know, and sometimes at the very next moment they may exercise it out, whether in relation with the siblings or out in school with the fellow peers in the classroom. I had this similar situation at home as well, just to testify and agree with what you have mentioned, because in my younger days as a dad, I didn't manage my emotions really well. There was a season I was probably very stressed up over many different things, and I lashed out quite much often at my child through harsh words or the tone, and he was just keeping quiet and feeling sulky and moody. But what really turned me around and was a wake-up call for me was when I saw him exacting the same behavior, almost the same words as well, to my wife. When my wife sort of like chided him for a wrong behavior. That was like, wow, he's learning it from me and he's exacting it on another person. But I think all is not lost per se. I mean, if we're just talking about like a transference or a modeling, right? While we talk about a negative behavior here, the same probably could be said for positive behaviors, right, Alicia? Would you agree with me?
Yes, that's right. So if you take time to connect with the child, you take time to journey with the child, and also to let the child feel respected. The child will have a right idea of what respect is. And as a result, the child will also apply the same way to the people around him. So for example, a parent who will take time to share kind words, words of affirmation, encouragement, same way, the child will also do this to the friends. And I think it's important for children to know that there is always a second chance. There's always a chance to try again. It's not all is lost. So I guess when parents shout and they discipline and punish the children, sometimes the children just clamp down and they don't want to talk anymore. But positive discipline helps us to reconnect with the children, talk about the behavior, so that children know that, okay, I didn't do appropriate behavior the first time. Maybe now with the conversation with my parent, I can try again. So this is something that I will do with my children. Would you like to try again? The young one, as young as 4, he would tell me, can I try again? So I think it's helping children to have that positive mindset as well.
Wow, this is great encouragement, and I hope all our listeners are taking down notes and be encouraged as well. Because to know that the actions that you display, sometimes even the words that you say, the patience you try to have with the children, the empathy we demonstrate to them, it goes a distance because they see it and they learn it, and in due time, they will behave the same way. Listeners, or parents out there, please be encouraged. You know, you might not see immediate turnarounds, that happening, but it does have a long-term positive impact on our children too. Alicia, I wanted to come back to an earlier thing that you mentioned. You talked about parents ourselves needing also to have self-care. And I thought this is so important. And maybe this is a little question to ask you, as a parent, mom of 4 kids, what do you do self-care for yourself?
I think there are a lot of things to manage and handle. So as a mom, I play a lot. What do I play? I actually would tell my friends, let's go out for a day of fun. Let's go to the beach. I'm a person who needs high adrenaline kind of play. So we go, the Sentosa have bungee jump or, the magazine. There was something that I would do to just play and release tension. Yeah, but also the other way is some people prefer books, prefer quiet moments, and I think it's fine as long as it gives you a bit of respite, it gives you protected time to get connected with yourself.
Every parents find what would cater to us.
Yes.
For some is social with friends and bungee jumping and all that stuff to let it out. For some of us, maybe you're a bit like me. Before you head home after work, you walk around your void deck for a while just to give yourself some mind space. Right? So all of us, it's important. Take care of yourself before we even talk about things like positive discipline with our children, because it's important. When we're adults, when parents ourselves, we are more emotionally calm, regulated. We can better regulate our children. It's just like on the airlines, right? When they say that in case of, if their emergency happens, the parents, please take care of yourself first, then you take care of the child. Alicia today has brought us through and talked a lot about positive discipline, to have conversations, to have good communication with our children. Could you share with all the parent listeners here any practical advice when you talk about communicating with children? How do you actually do it? And especially so when, for example, the kids all are demonstrating very challenging behaviours.
So I think pertaining to positive discipline, the 3 practical tips, the 3 C's I will give to all parents. First is connection. So you need to connect with your children. You need to allow the children to know that you're always there. They are there to journey with them. They are not abandoned because they have shown inappropriate behaviors. I think that's really important. Number 2, consistency. Be consistent in what you are doing. If you have state certain consequences, for example, if you do this, then I have to take away your screen time, then let it not be just a threat. It should be something that is consistent and you carry it through. And the third thing is to co-creation. Co-create solutions with the children. So let's co-create rules, co-create the boundaries, co-create the solutions together. So if you encounter this again, what would you do? So allow the child to contribute, because the child will have certain ideas that you might want to hear. So these are the 3 practical tips that I'll give to parents pertaining to positive discipline: connection, consistency, and co-creation.
Wow, it seems really like these kind of strategies, like the 3 C's that you have mentioned, requires us parents to really involve the children, take into consideration their emotions when you talk about connecting with them, and being consistent. We are not the kind that say one thing and do another. And I really like the last one about co-creating a solution, involving them to chime in. Am I right to say that involving them to chime in and give suggestion, ideas? Could you expound a little bit on that?
If my child has shown an inappropriate behavior, after he has calmed down, I actually told him, no, if you were to face it again, what would you have done? What would you do? And then he will come up with a solution for me and say, okay, so if we see this situation happen again, so this is a solution you would demonstrate, or this is something that you would display. So, okay, let's try it. And it allows the child to know that, okay, I have ownership of it. And of course, the truth is sometimes that solution may not work, but it's okay. Let's try it again the second time. Then the second time I actually asked him, so the first time we said we would try this solution, it didn't quite happen. So what do you think went wrong? How could we try again? So this whole idea of trying again comes back in. So the child will know that, number 1, I'm given the responsibility. Number 2, I can always try again. And mommy is here to journey with me, to help me make this journey an easier one. And I think that's very, very important for children.
I must say, very empowering approach. It really allows the child to take ownership and feels like he or she is part of the solution as well. And this is very different from maybe you and I, where we grew up from when we were being parented. It was the controlling measure, whatever I say, just stop it and don't do it anymore. At a young age, we'll probably just comply. But I feel like what you've just suggested, as we put our child in a position and co-creating solution, it gets them start to think. Actually, it's also good for their brain development. So it's beyond just a behavioral, but it does them holistic development good as well. This is such a wonderful episode, and I'm sure parents, listeners, we are all still dying really to hear more tips. So before, Alicia, we let you off this podcast, would you have any other discipline strategies that are effective for our listeners to put in our parenting tool belt, as we so call it?
The relationship that you have with a child is really important. The most important thing is don't try to correct the child when the child is not ready emotionally. allow the child to calm down. And sometimes calming down means you need to hug the child. So just being there, holding his hand, holding her hand, or just giving him or her a hug until the child calms down, then we can talk more. So I think that connection, not only just verbal connection, the physical connection and the touch, they are really important.
This is simple but yet very timely reminder for a lot of parents. I know we hug our kids a lot when they are baby, toddler, lower primary, and slowly the hug becomes an air hug and a handshake, and we don't even hug anymore. But it's a reminder, no matter how old the kids are, these hugs means a lot to them, means a lot to us as parents too. So the connection, the physical and the emotional connection is important.
And I think the hugs are always given in happy context.
Yes.
But actually, it's a lot of times when the child is not in a great state of emotion, it's the time where the child probably need affirmation and assurance through hugs and just touches.
Alicia, I wanted to get your insights on this. I've heard from many parents that I work with that they believe or they have learned this discipline strategy called timeout, especially when the kids are demonstrating challenging behavior, going into their meltdowns and all that. What are your thoughts on this?
So I think timeout was really popular many years back. Now it is no longer like timeout where you leave the child alone in a corner of a room, or sometimes they call it a timeout chair, a timeout corner. Actually, I think it is better now if you decide to give the child some time away or some time to calm down. It's good to sit with the child. You don't just leave the child alone. You sit with the child, like I said earlier, is to just hold hands with the child, or just to let the child know, I'm here, I'm ready when you are ready. So it's to assure the child. So what I would do is sometimes after a while, I will actually ask the child, are you ready to talk now? And if the child is not ready to talk, and I'll say, okay, we can come back later, but we need to come back to this in a while's time because I really want to hear from you. So the child know that there's a time limit because we can't take forever, right? The truth of it. Yeah. So the child will know. So sometimes we ask questions to guide the child to answer some of this so that you can draw the child out to talk more. Like my daughter, she needs more assurance. She needs to know that I'm on her side. She needs to know that I'm here for her. I understand what she's going through before she opens up to talk about why she hit the sibling or why did she shout at the sibling. The words is important. Your presence is important. So timeout is not just leaving the child alone. And the last thing we want the child to feel is for the child to feel rejected and abandoned because of an inappropriate behavior he or she has displayed.
That's so true, because a lot of times we, knowingly or not unknowingly, when we execute the so-called time-out discipline measures, it unknowingly created rejection in the child, or like it's really like a punishment and you are really standing at one corner, you cannot talk to anyone, you cannot do what you usually do. But I really like how, Alicia, you put it, that it's still about parents being there. While they're there, the purpose of that time away is to allow them to calm down. And they are only able to calm down if they feel a sense of assurance, a sense of security. So sometimes parents checking in back on them or just sitting by their side gives them the assurance that they are not rejected, they are not overlooked in that sense. Personally, for myself, when I tried doing this time away kind of strategy with my child, letting him to calm down, I found that what worked for my child is not just leaving him alone and sitting with him and holding his hand. That helps. No talking, but we're just sitting there and holding his hand. And I've added on one more step, which is there are regular times I will just squeeze his hand 3 times, and I remind him that 3 times means I love you, and that sends a signal to him. So I didn't know whether it worked or not, but I realized recently it probably worked, because on our way to school, I still sent him to school, and we were walking to school, he suddenly squeezed my hand 3 times. Maybe it's his way of telling me that he loves me. I hope that. So again, I think on that note, it's really about knowing your child's personality, his or her type, and what would work for that particular child. But the whole idea, as I hear Alicia, is about allowing the child the time and the space to calm down, and then we can better engage and interact. So we really thank Alicia. You have shared such wonderful tips and insights with us today. I wish this podcast can go on for another 20 minutes. But before we let you go, honestly, I would like you to have the final words of encouragement for all the parents that are listening to this podcast here. And maybe some of the parents are really struggling, to handle their child's very challenging behavior on the home front.
Firstly, parents too hard on yourself. I always believe in redemptive parenting. There's always a chance to come back to it again. As long as you want to connect with your child, you want to make it right, be intentional about it. My encouragement to all parents is we are all not born ready-made parents, but we will journey with the child, and it is okay to let the child see us fall, see us fail, but coming back again with more resilience, and at the same time to show the child that we are also trying and we are giving ourselves a second chance. So parents, take heart. Parenting journey is never easy, but it is always made easier with help from people and also listening to podcasts or reading up about it.
Yes. So if you ever need help, look for friends, trusted friends around you. And we also hope that the Parent Podcast can be a good resource help for you. Today, in our episode of the Parent Podcast with Alicia, we've talked about positive discipline. So effective discipline doesn't have to involve punishment. It is really about spending time, having conversations, using the opportunity to teach and guide our children in love. There are many strategies, things like natural consequences, time away as we talk about it, but it's all to help our child calm down, help our child to learn about their actions, understanding the impact of their behavior. I specifically love what our guest Alicia here has mentioned today. If you still remember the 3 C's that she has mentioned about connecting with our children, that gives our children the sense of security, assurance. Parents ourselves being consistent in our words and our actions to follow through, especially when we set out a discipline for them. And lastly, involving them to co-create solutions together. Even when they messed up, when they try to restore the situations, they can be part of the solutions as well. So really, thank you so much, Alicia, for being with us today. A big shout out to you. And for all our parent listeners, if you have young children, hope this podcast today is really useful for you. Now, one big event that is coming up that's related to Alicia and the work that she does, we have the Good Start SG Early Childhood Conference. This year is titled The Power of Collaboration. It will be happening on the 27th of September at the Suntec City Convention Centre. Registration is now open, and at this event, we will be expecting about close to 1,000 attendees of parents, educators, and there will be a lot of resources that's going to be shared. There are going to be booths that are going to be there, there's going to be workshops, team bonding activities, exhibitions, and there's going to be human library. What I've heard is that there's going to be experts around and to interact with all of the attendees there to share good practices, tips and advice, how around parenting and also how we can better know our children. So if you're keen to find out more or to register for the Good Start SG Early Childhood Conference, head over to www.goodstart.sg. So we hope you've enjoyed our podcast episode today. Please feel free to share with a friend or parent whom you feel might benefit from it. Do keep tuning in to the Parent Podcast to learn and grow in your parenting journey.